welcome, Michelle. This is our first live together. So our goal really is to speak about something that I think is probably so sensitive and delicate of a talk topic for many of us right now. So why don't we start by you introducing yourself, telling us what you do, and then I'll talk about how we align in hopes that whatever we have to say tonight will be inspiring and helpful to people.
Sounds great. So I'm Coach Red, and I always start with where people can reach me in case they want, and that's www.coachred1, that's the number 1.com. So www.coachred1.com. And what I am and who I am is a person that stands for peace in families. I keep saying the word peace because it's not always peaceful being a parent. And I'm a parenting coach, and I really, really, really stand for peace in people's families. And that's who I am, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. And so you meet with parents of all ages, or do you focus specifically on one age bracket in parents working with their children better?
Okay, so I tend to connect better with parents ages 30s to 50s because that's basically, well, I'm being generous, but that's my age bracket.
Okay.
So yeah, I work with all parents of all ages, but I tend to connect more with people who are older. And just to give a little background about me, and I'll really make this like the shortest background about me ever. I was divorced, and as a single mother, I had to come up with strategies to parent my kids in a way that they would still feel loved while I was going to school, going to work, picking them up, dropping them off, running myself ragged, trying to get my life together. And I just found that there were certain things missing. I wanted them to feel loved. I wanted them to feel safe. And then as they got older, some of them made poor choices. One of my kids was really, really difficult to parent. And over years of getting educated and my personal experience, I really developed great strategies for communicating with kids in a meaningful way.
Amazing. So the way that Coach Red and I aligned is, fortunately, you're in my 2020 program. And one of the beautiful things that has really come out of that is building relationship with women around the world and realizing that the skills we build while we're exercising really intersects with the skills that people bring, in your case, as a parenting coach. And we started envisioning how can we work together, and this is just our first go at it, to get moms, and I think it's especially hard in the pandemic, I know myself included, as a mom of teenagers, which is incredibly, it's a struggle in general, but complicated by the pandemic. To find the words, the skills, and the tools to navigate parenting. And my background as, a fitness instructor, yoga instructor, and a practicing mindfulness instructor, which is to employ those styles of staying focused, remaining calm, being mindful about our communication skills when interfacing with our kids. And I think we carry that into our relationships, whether it's with our partners, our friends, our extended family. So what I really wanted to talk about tonight, on this evening, that I hope whoever's watching live and also after this, which we'll post on our walls, is, a couple key takeaways, strategies that have worked for you as a coach and as a mom, and some strategies that has worked for me in my training to be a productive mom, so that when we lay our heads down at night, we don't do a laundry list of shoulda, coulda, wouldas, that we don't punish ourselves and say, like, if only I had said this differently, I wouldn't feel like I completely scarred my children. And I feel like we're doing that more than ever. I mean, we're definitely self-introspective, like in general, but
Right.
now we're like raw nerves all day long, right?
Right.
So let's start. Now that we've kind of laid down the groundwork of who we are and what we're hopefully going to impart on whomever is viewing this, as what are your 1 to 2, and we'll ping pong match, key strategies without giving too much away, because I also want people to come to you as a coach from watching this, but what are your key, like, these are my go-to strategies when the going gets tough in any parenting situation?
So before I answer that, I wrote down a quote because this is so, I saw this and I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty much what we do. So Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist in the early 1930s, and this is what he said: between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Wow.
I saw that and I was like, oh, this is perfect because this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I tell people to pause when you are starting to engage with your teenagers, especially when the teenager is starting to yell from another room, for example. And it could be something benign like, hey, did you do the laundry yet? But it becomes a little bit more offensive and hyper and whatever when it's coming from another room. So the first thing I tell people is go to the room where your child is. Like, don't.
Wow, so good.
Right? Look, I've been guilty of it. None of us are perfect. And it doesn't matter because being imperfect lets your kids know that we make mistakes. We all do. And it's really, really good. But that's
There's that freedom.
What's that? Yeah, there's that freedom, right? So one of the things that I tell my that I tell my clients is just meet them where they are. So if you're used to this game of dance, I like to call it, where you're always yelling from another room, and suddenly your kid yells from the other room and you're like, can you please stop yelling from the other room? But you're yelling from the other room to tell her to get out from the other room. And then you suddenly like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I am now walking into that room and talking. They're going to think you're crazy. They're going to be like, what are you doing here? You know?
Right. I love that. It's like, we're so in the moment. We're so triggered when our kids do something that like hits that point where we're going to react. And I love that pause practice. I teach women all the time, find your pause practice. But sometimes it's so simplistic. That pause practice is saying, hi, I'm now standing right in front of you. You can't
Right.
yell at me. We're talking human to human.
Right.
Love
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. And then another thing I do is I say, if you're already engaged in an arguing match, like an actual argument with your kids, where you're trying to boss them around or just trying to get them to do their homework or whatever it is, it could be, you know, you're having a bad day and so you're arguing with your kid. I say step back from that as well. Like, just stop and say to your kid, you know, this is crazy. Like, I need a moment. Let me take a moment. And
Wow.
it's interesting also this week because I'm constantly in learning and revising things, what I say, how I say it, right? Someone said, and I'm not sure exactly, maybe we could even go back and forth on this. Someone said, don't say, I need me time. I've been a mommy all day. I just need me time. You know why? Because you're still a mommy. And that can actually be translated in the kid's brain as, oh, she needs a break from being a mother. Like, I'm a problem. So the better way to say that is, I just need a moment. I'm tired.
Right. And I think that's actually applicable when we talk about self-care too. It's like, all too often we go and say like, I need a spa day. I need to get away from everything. And I used to say that when my kids were younger. And I remember my mom, who was also a single mother and who was so selfless to a fault. She looked at me and she said, I embrace that the world has changed and it's enabled women in any stage or in any predicament to reserve more time for themselves. But by you saying like, I need to get away, it says that being here right now isn't satisfactory.
Right.
So it doesn't mean you shouldn't still communicate to your kids that you deserve time too, but it's all about the language and it's all about how you package it. And, you know, as a marketer, I recognize the power of that.
Yes.
And, you know, it's how we say the things we do. So when we go to our children and we say, I'm just going to take a breath, or I love you so much that I don't want to yell. So let's count 5 together. So when they're little, I used to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we would communicate, because otherwise it's boom, you know?
Yes. Is it 5 yet? Is it 5 yet? Is it 5 yet? Right? You get the kid who does. I had a kid like that.
I have that one. You know, I always talk about, you know, the apple doesn't fall far. You know, I have an adult ADHD reality. who doesn't in this modern world, but some more than others. And I have a child, with that diagnosis, and, is it 5 yet? Is it 5 yet? And practicing the pause with a child like that is not as easy, but it means we need it more. It's like, if we have that, go into autopilot, like,
Yeah.
I know that I need the pause, and that you've trained yourself, which I really want to pick your brain about, like, these are great strategies, but how do you embed them in your mind and in your behavior so that they're actually something that happens without putting too much thought into it? Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yes. So there's a rule called 2190.
Okay.
Takes, I forgot the name of the scientist. I'm a geek. So like science is like a big thing for me. So I apologize for all the quotes and scientists and stuff, but I really do my research.
It works.
So a scientist had said that 21 days to create a habit, and then 90 days after that for it to be life, just the way you live.
Right.
So what you're asking me is, how do you make this a habit in the first place?
Right.
You have to have 21 consecutive days of being like this and talking like this. Put notes on your phone. Just pop up 5 times a day. Make a pop-up on your phone that just says pause, to remind you that when you're in that moment, you get to pause, because you don't know when those moments are going to come up where you're going to bark something at your partner or at your children. You don't really know. So put a note on your refrigerator that just says pause, literally just put notes in places, sticky notes in your car, just so that the idea of the pause is in your brain.
Right.
Then
I love that.
Implement it in the moment. And it's also okay to be engaging in language or behavior that you don't like in yourself or the other, and in the middle suddenly stop, like, I'm supposed to pause.
Right.
It's okay to do that too, which is a lot of what happens really in the beginning.
It is. And, we must be very connected, because the whole 21-day habit forming ideology, which has been scientifically backed, that 21 days to secure the habit, 90 days to actually ensure that it's, non-negotiable, and it can apply to anything. So my 20-day workout program was founded in my mind, not only as the 2020 year that we were in, and to beautify it, but to also see it as that's that habit forming reality. So I love your message that when it comes to parenting and the struggles we face, and I think parenting struggles manifest from newborn all the way up to parenting our adult children, which I'm not at that stage, but I have friends that are, and we commiserate on very similar struggles.
Yeah.
Parenting struggles come at any age and stage, and we still need to practice that pause. We still need to have those, those messages that say, I'm going to pause, breathe, maybe take a few moments, maybe journal, whatever your method is, and then react or come up with a plan with that child at any age. Now, the newborn or the toddler is going to be a little slower on the receiving end, but regularity, consistency is what I think yields the progress in trying to message properly to our children at any point.
Right. And I am a parent of adult children. And so it's an interesting perspective that now, if I start like just I guess arguing with my kids, or what I do more of now that they're adults, I give them too much advice. I got to stop that too. There comes a point where you've taught them, and now advice is just nagging. And I think we nag our teenagers, we nag our adult children, and I've paused mid-nag. That sounds funny. It sounds like a foreign language, mid-nag.
Mid-nag, yes. But it actually should be a formal term, because there is a point in the mid-nag where you're actually like, either a couple things happen. I don't know if this resonates. You hear yourself nagging. You're like, ew, I don't like myself. I remember being on the receiving end of this nag. And then, or you're mid-nag and you're so fired up that you're like, I can't stop,
So as you get older and you lay down the groundwork with your kids, then they start to stop you mid-nag.
Oh, good to know.
So my kids will say, Mom, You need to stop. And I remember when they were teenagers and I said to them, can we come up with like a code word when I'm starting to do behaviors that you don't like? And, you know, we kind of worked together on that. They're like, Mom, how about stop? Okay, I can do stop. Like,
no, but that as a parenting coach is a very helpful strategy, which I appreciate, because that's not something that comes natural. Like, you have this method, and maybe it's saying to your kids, I could see that from being elementary age up to adult children, saying, hey, in a very like logical space when you're not in it with them, to say to them, let's come up with a code word that, you know, you're in a pressure cooker with me and you've hit a breaking point. You say this word, and same on my end. When I feel like you're not listening, we're butting heads, and I love you so much, I don't want to get to that point with you. My code word is this. And that could be a very healthy method.
And empowering.
Oh, good.
And empathetic. Like, that's something I wanted to bring up also. Like, it's very empowering to your kids to give them the honor of saying, hey, you know, this isn't okay, but it's a respectful way of giving them the power to say how we're engaging is not working, you know?
Right.
It's beautiful. And then empathy. I did want to throw that in here. If you can
empathize that for ourselves and for the other person.
Yes. You know, you were once a child too. We were once children too. So maybe we can put ourselves in the position of the child that we're arguing with, and like, what was it like for us? Like, when you mentioned that, I kind of like got excited, because empathy is the basis for all communication and loving communication.
Right. I hear that.
Because if you can empathize with the other person, then you're already on a ground where they're open to communication. But if they don't get you, so I'm calling it empathy, but really it's you get me, I get you.
Right.
When we get each other, we're open to hearing the other person.
Right. So then, and accomplishing that in and of itself is a struggle, because that would mean that we would need to have some sort of personal reality that we get ourselves. That we have to be going into the situation knowing what our triggers are. And you know, just an anecdote to say how little we often get ourselves, even later on in life. You know, working with women in a fitness context is actually so much, and I never realized this until creating the 2020 program. It renders people so vulnerable, because it brings up all these things that they've been stuffing away: body image, sense of self, capabilities, getting older and not making peace with that, and understanding our limitations, but also celebrating the process at the same time that we have the ability to still move. So I've been like dealing with people in such different ways than ever before, and I'm realizing how little people really get themselves, myself included. I mean, I'm not spirit. I think I can do a million things, and I can't anymore. So I guess, like, really, what's the question here, after you making that really powerful message of, you know, empathy being a required ingredient in a healthy relationship? You know, if the teen or the child or the adult child doesn't get themselves, and if the parent doesn't get themselves, what would be the preliminary steps to embed empathy in our dialogue, so that we can at least try, that we can at least get to a better place, even if we don't have that built-in mechanism to be loving to ourselves and each other in a way that promotes.
So it's interesting, because people use these. Are you familiar with grounding? It's what I'm about to say is very similar to grounding.
Okay.
So if the parent and any human being has to want to be empathetic in order to get to a place where they can be empathetic. So if you're faced with a client or a person in your life, and you want to be all in and you're not getting why it's not working, I tell people to do grounding exercises. But what I mean by that is noticing what's going on in your body, what's going on around you in a moment. So let me get very specific, because that sounds very esoteric, and I tend to be a little bit like a hippie. I think we talked about this. So I guess.
And I like,
right?
I keep my crystals wherever I go. So like, I'm with you. This is like one of my grounding ones. So, okay, where were we?
Okay, right?
Specifics, right.
Girl.
Abstract is where I live. So I love specifics, not only for the viewers, but for myself too. It's
Okay.
awesome.
So what I'm going to say is specific is like this. I'm going to back up so you can kind of see me. Talk about body image. I'm glad I wore a black top today. Okay.
Gorgeous.
I have lost some weight on her 2020 little
Stop. It's about feeling strong.
Okay. So what I tell people to do is to put their feet on the ground, sit in a chair, put your hands on your legs, and from your head, first look around and just notice the items in the room that you're looking at. Notice what's on the ceiling, notice what's on the floor, and then I'll ask people, we're not going to actually do the exercise because it's weird, but
or it's not applicable, but I would love for people to do it at home at any point that they're watching this.
So I would tell people to just notice the items in the room, the furniture, the look of the tile or carpet or rug, if you're outside, if you're on the grass, notice the things around you. Once you've done that, I want you to notice if there's a fan blowing your hair, or if you're nervous and you're sweating. Notice how do your ears feel? Do you have tension in your neck? And you go all the way down and you say there's cold air going over. I'm in Florida, so we have like air conditioning on. So cold air going over my hand. It's warm between my hand and my legs. I feel the cold tile under my toes.
Right.
And then what that does, so that's the fast rundown of the exercise. What that does is it gets a person aware of themselves and their surroundings.
Right.
And they get, believe it or not, from there to a place of empathy of others. Because suddenly you notice the little things. You notice when you're hungry before you're famished. You notice that something happens in your throat when that person triggers you in some way.
Right.
Or you notice like a chill in the back of your neck when, I don't know, like different things happen with different people.
Right, when you start to have that alert, that anxiety building.
The anxiety, exactly. That would be a good one for anxiety. But you notice the tension in the various parts of your body.
Right.
So this is an exercise that is so easy. I do it with some of my clients, like on the phone with them or on Zoom with them, because they don't get it. Some of them, like you say, like they're so far removed from empathy and they don't know why their family dynamic isn't working.
Right.
So I literally start with this exercise and we do it on every phone call so that they start getting in tune with their bodies. Then I take them to the next level. Remember when we did that exercise and you were anxious and you felt it in your stomach and then you yelled at your child the next day? It's possible that your child is feeling that too.
And then it brings this whole heightened level of awareness, because I think for many parents, again, at any stage of parenting, there's a disconnect. It's like, I'm feeling my feelings. And I think that that's devoid of empathy. And I think we all suffer from it in any of our human interactions. And that's the backbone, the foundation of the practicing mindfulness ideology that I'm not always good at practicing, but I'm certainly great at advocating for, which is, gaining an awareness of your surroundings, your five senses, using the acronym, HALT, are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? Once you've given a title to your feelings, then you know where you're at. I always had this method when my kids were little that I haven't been as good at it as a teenage mom. As a mom of teenagers, I realized that
I didn't know that about you.
So not, but that I would never, like, you're always tired, physically tired when your children are very young. It's just the nature of the beast. And I would always have this method. And I love that you said Post-it notes around the house, because I actually put Post-its around the house to remind myself that when I'm tired, I would have to press pause even more before I acted.
Yeah.
Because we don't have our faculties. But as I'm getting older and I realize I'm not as tired, but I'm definitely emotionally tired because the push and pull looks and feels a lot different and significantly more draining. But what you're saying as a parenting coach, and which is such a quality piece that is an extension of this practicing mindfulness methodology or practice, whatever it is, it has many, many parts, that we actually need to stop and ground, do the whole practice exercise that you just shared, and also re-embed that empathy by saying, what you're doing, you're creating for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that story, like the value of a smile, like one person smiled at another person and they track the impact of the smile.
Yeah.
Well, this is just a one-to-one,
Right.
translation. My feelings are hurting you. And I think that if we digested it that way, I think we'd all parent a lot in a very different way, right?
Parents in a very different way. And then it opens us up to guilt and shame, which is really just a practice of, you just have to stop that.
It's too hard because it's a downward spiral, because
Yeah.
once we get into the, on the guilt and shame train,
Yeah.
you're going nowhere fast because
Yeah.
you've already self-defeated. And I liken it to even fitness. Once you've told yourself, I didn't do it, I didn't go to the gym, I didn't do that workout of Marla's today, I might as well just throw the towel in. Like, who does that hurt? That hurts you. But if you got back on the positivity train, you're well on your way to redesigning those behaviors, and it comes back to that 21-day habit forming, concept.
Right.
That if you lose a day or you miss a day of being a good parent, doesn't mean you need to keep going down and then the relationship further strains. So this is very eye-opening.
That's very,
how many similarities lie within.
yeah. So I'm going to be kind of vulnerable, but I'm not going to give details. So it's going to be somewhat vulnerable. When one of my daughters was 14, she got sick, so sick we couldn't figure out what it was, and she was in the hospital for 2 weeks. During that time, my other daughter was starting college for the first time. And I was sleeping every night in the hospital with my 14-year-old. So I was not a good mother. I was so intense with this hospital situation. And it was an intense situation. Like, I thought she could be dying. It was so bad. Her skin was sloughing. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. So it's obviously very, very embedded in my brain, that whole situation.
Right.
I carry guilt because when my daughter wanted me to go with her to college, like on her first day, she's like, Mom, can you drive me to school on the first day? It's like kindergarten, right? But it was college. And I said something really mean. I said, you're not almost dying. I need to stay here because she could die. I can't believe I even said that. And I carry that with me and I tried to repair it over the years because I was in a heightened state of alert and of anxiety. I was not my calm hippie self. I was not. I was not the hippie mom that day. I was a mess.
Right.
And the reason I'm telling this story is because we can repair that. That was a really bad thing to say. Really.
Right.
As a parenting coach, I'm telling you all, don't do it. Don't talk like that to your kids.
Right.
And I've spent a lot of time repairing that. And I did.
We all hit breaking point. We all hit those.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that's what I was trying to say. Like, my other daughter doesn't remember that I said that to her.
Oh, wow.
And I beat myself up about it. So it's interesting. The reason she doesn't remember that happened is because we repaired our relationship.
Wow.
And that's not who I am as a mother. And she knows.
Right. I think of like a pro-con list. Like, if our kids were actually doing a tally sheet, we're doing significantly, more times.
Don't encourage that.
What's that?
Don't encourage a tally sheet, please.
We would never do it. But if hypothetically, if it were something that was happening in our children's lives at any stage, I would like to believe that for all the times that there were trips and falls and mistakes, like an example you gave, that they're, circling back to the majority that is good. So to kind of include some of these strategies. If anyone's coming on now or fast forwarded after watching, once we repost, let's recap the strategies that we imparted on anyone watching about practicing pause and mindfulness around parenting, and how those lessons can actually carry over to the self-care and the healthy lifestyles that we both embrace and participate in. So you started with the practice of like the reminders, right? We put the reminders.
Yes, putting reminders to begin the practice of pausing rather than just reacting, is to start putting reminders on your phone, put Post-it notes around the room, to just with the word pause, so that it becomes something that you're starting to do.
Right.
Talked about the 2190, which is 21 days for a habit to become a habit, and then 90 more days for it just to become the way you act.
Right. And how there's so much power in self-improvement that, that 2190 concept, that philosophy that has been scientifically proven, there's a great deal of research behind it. And it dates back to the 30s, right? Isn't that where it evolved from? Okay. That it just
I don't remember his name. Dr. Marx? I don't remember.
I was just reading it. I was like, I've learned about it in school, but I remember coming back to it in the whole 2020 program, and how that's all you really need to get the wheels, in motion and set yourself on a habit that's healthy. But also that anything we do, at any age we are at, and people, they say we're so fixed and set in our ways, but if you're a creature of wanting to improve, wanting to grow, wanting to change, and that's something that I'm always trying to do. I'm always punishing myself. Oh, I could have done this different. And while we try to avoid the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, if you are focused on the growth mindset instead of fixed mindset, this is a viable option that you can embed these first two strategies you shared as a way to grow in the right direction as a parent. So if you've done maybe the last year during 2020 pretty steak year, you made a lot of mistakes in your reactions, you can develop this pause practice and respond better to your kids when they trigger you, when they push those buttons, when they scream from the other room, which I love that you said that. Meet them where they are. That was so, it's simple, but that's in the simple strategies lies the greatest wisdom. Right? And then you talk about empathy.
And we talked about how to become empathetic when you're not even there. Like, you're not aware of your own stuff. How are you empathetic with others? So that's when we talked about the grounding strategy, where you just basically are aware of your surroundings in a chair for 5 minutes or less, and aware of the movement of your hair, the movement of your eyelashes, the shoulders, just little things, the fingertips, just noticing the little things that are actually happening in your own body, so that you can imagine what that would be like in your child.
Amazing. And if you think about it, I'm sure you've heard this before as a coach, that's usually the recommendation when somebody is about to hit a panic attack, is to focus on one spot and take slow cleansing breaths, which is essentially meditation. Which is what I'm advocating all the time, which is, starting your day with a few meditative moments, stretches. If you're an observant Jew like I am, it's always like saying a few blessings in the morning, taking a few moments instead of darting out to the kitchen, having your coffee, starting the day, running out the door. It's just slowing it down. And one of my favorite books of all time, Slowing Down to the Speed of Life.
I have that one. I'm going to write it down.
Okay, I'm going to post it. It is like my go-to manual on life. It's so simplistic, but it's essentially what the title says, is slowing down to the speed of life. So, but I love how your insertion, the notion of empathy for yourself and for the others, and understanding that what you're doing to the other person is what you're feeling yourself. You're perpetuating the problem without punishing yourself, without the guilt train or the shame. And I really love that. Did we miss anything?
I don't think so. We talked about the pause. We talked about the empathy. And those were like the two main things. I mean, you mentioned off the cuff other ways of pausing, which is journaling, counting to 5. You mentioned a couple of really good things that way.
Right.
It's really a personal thing. you know?
Right. I like it. It's differentiated instruction, which used to be multiple intelligences. You know, in the classroom, educators are now learning that, like, which took a long time, if you ask me. They're like, oh, they all learn differently. You know, some have to take
Right.
it. Some,
Maria Montessori figured that out in what, 1900 or what? I don't know.
and they deemed her clinically insane. Like, she was put in an insane asylum. So, like, I guess the world wasn't ready for it.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah.
Crazy,
She's
right?
so not insane.
Not insane. The reality is that, like, we all learn and digest information differently.
Yeah.
Like, I have to, you know, actually really, like, touch and feel and understand something to, like, internalize it. If they're just, like, talking at me, like, it just goes through my head and out the other way.
Brown teacher, like, walk. Like, no, there needs to be other senses involved here.
Right, exactly. So when it comes to, you know, finding your pause practice and your meditative approach to life, but specifically to our conversation as a parenting coach, and our dialogue, is when we approach our parenting of children at any age, when things get tough and you need to find that pause practice, you need to slow down and breathe. And I don't say that in an aggressive way. We all do, myself included. Your form of pause practice is going to manifest in various ways. So some people need to take a walk. Some people just need to sit and breathe. Some people, I know adult women friends of mine who actually have, like, think putty and play with putty.
Yes. I mean, I don't use it, but I recommend it to my clients who need it because that's their strongest sense. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like that you said strongest sense, because it is contingent on your strongest sense, because that's what brings you back into yourself. You know, some people, it's about cooking up something really quickly to, you know, slow it down in your head and, you know, distract.
Right.
So it's really very personal. So our message together as unit is to find your pause practice, personalize it, and use it when you need it most to avoid that immediate reaction that compromises our healthy, peaceful relationships with our children, our partners, and their extended family.
Exactly. And I want to say one more thing about that is that you're also modeling for your children behavior that you want them to have with them, with their friends, with their partners, with their siblings. And I know that we kind of got far into this conversation before I say, like, even with siblings, when my kids were little, we had the peace table. Now, of course, I'm a little bit of a hippie, so I did things.
I love that.
And I think it may have even come from Native American culture. I'm not even sure. But basically, you could have a rock or a flower or something on this table, and the person who's holding it is the person who gets to talk, and the other person doesn't. So my kids,
like talking stick.
Yes, exactly.
That's Native.
So my kids would sit at this little tiny table in the corner. Like, they'd be getting into an argument, fighting over the remote control or fighting over that one toy. Like, they were really little when they did this. And I have lots of really fun things to stop kids from fighting and get them connected instead. So what I would have them sit at the peace table, and the one that would hold it. So in the middle of their argument, they'd be like, we have to go to the peace table. And they would run to the peace table, and one kid would talk with the talking stick, and then the other kid would listen, and then, okay, it's your turn now.
I love that.
It was hysterical, actually, with little kids doing that. But
I love that. I really think that that is the recipe for success. And that's, like, such a great closing thought, that, you know, the role modeling, and I say that with fitness, when women send me pictures of them and their children working out, I'm like, I know that you're doing that because you're trying to make the most of time and being inclusive and, you know, doing it together. But oh my gosh, you're communicating to your children that movement is fun, that it's not a chore, that they don't have to loathe it the way so many people over time have grown to hate exercise because they felt like it was a punishment for any wrongdoing, that they ate something wrong at the table. Now I got to go work it off. But if you see these moms finding joyful movement and doing with their children, you're saving your children from a life of loathing movement.
True.
And
so true.
And even in the context of parenting, you know, if I approach my parenting, you know, with all of these messages that you're sharing, which are gold, and that's why I advocate for anyone watching now or later that finding a parenting coach or a life coach, and, you know, or a health coach, we can't do it alone. And it doesn't mean that the coach knows it all, but relying on someone else to just give you tools in your toolbox takes a little bit of the pressure off.
Right.
So role modeling is a very valuable lesson as we conclude our live session together, that we really can inspire kids to lead such healthy, meaningful lives when we say to them, I'm managing the situation by pausing before screaming at you, by coming to your room instead of screaming from another room. That I want to look you in the eye and say, I hear what you're saying. And maybe you have to say, I don't agree. And I'm going to be a parent now and make some really hard decisions and statements. But I love you enough that I'm willing to communicate with you until we get to a place of mutual understanding. Or if we can't now, maybe it's in an hour or after the peace table. So thank you so much, Coach Red, for taking the time to inspire me, hopefully inspire anyone who's watching this now or after the fact. And I hope we have another conversation like this again, where we can share our different experiences, strengths, and all of our vision to lead more peaceful family lives.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for bringing me on live. This was a lot of fun. I love
it. Was so much fun.
For like 2
and when I share it, I'll also share your contact information because I love your message and it's so hippy dippy perfect, like I try and aspire to be.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night. A happy, healthy week.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Be well. Bye.